Welcome to the Sober Nation FM podcast, where we're putting recovery on the map. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. This show is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Do you want to take your recovery to the next level? Do you want more support, community, and fellowship? Sobriety Engine is an incredible community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. You can get a ton of great tips, resources, and guidance to help you succeed in recovery and in life. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. Sober Nation FM is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle, all while supporting your sobriety, then you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Nation, let's hop right into today's episode. Today, I'll be speaking with Doctor of Pharmacy, Dietary Supplements Advisor, and founder of Reaction Recovery, Jeff Simone. Thanks for coming on the show, Jeff.
What's up, John? Great to be here.
Hey, thanks for coming on, man. So before we get into talking about Reaction Recovery, your 12 daily rules for recovery, tell me briefly about how you actually made it into recovery after over 15 years of struggling with addiction. What did things look like before you actually got sober?
Yeah. First, thank you for asking me on to this podcast. I think that you do a great job. I was on with you about a year ago with the Sobriety Blueprint.
Yeah.
That was actually the first podcast that I ever did. So I lost my podcast virginity, there with that one. And I've done, several since then. And I thought you were great with that. And I've been following along with you with Sober Nation. And I think that you're really doing a great job. You have incredible guests come on. So it's a privilege to be included in that group.
Thanks, man. Well, no, I feel like you have a lot to offer. So I definitely want to, extract all that valuable information from you for our listeners. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So kind of like briefly, I'll just say who I am, what I did, and then I'll give a little bit of a background to my story. So I'm Jeff Simone. I'm a doctor of pharmacy. I'm a certified dietary supplement advisor, and I founded Reaction Recovery about a year and a half ago. We're a one-on-one recovery consultation service. Okay, I work with folks in early recovery, mostly recovering from drug and alcohol addictions, and the focus is on diet, nutrition, supplementation, how that all may or may not interact with current medications that somebody is taking. And the whole goal is to establish a regular routine to help stabilize the internal environment and hopefully decrease the risk of relapse.
Got it.
I believe sobriety is won or lost in the trenches of everyday life. That's a series of actions that, when repeated over and over and over again, set that framework for a successful recovery and a successful life. So that's sort of what I'm all about. I'm in recovery myself, opioid, amphetamine addiction, among other things. I got sober for good in 2016. I had been trying for several years before that. And like you said, it was a 15-year, maybe a little bit longer, continuous drug addiction. And it was bad. I mean, it's, my story is no different than anybody else's in terms of, it's that same progression of fun with problems, and then just problems. From age 20 to 30, so my entire 20s, I didn't draw a sober opiate breath in that decade. There was not a 24-hour segment where I didn't have some type of opiate in my system. And that's just the way that it was. Some of these, there's a lot of sayings that we have in recovery, right? So, people are always throwing around slogans, and one of them is, it's not for people who need it, it's for people who want it.
Right.
I will tell you, so I needed to be sober for probably, since I was maybe 21.
Okay.
But I wanted to be sober. I wanted it for at least 6, 7, 8 years, before I finally got sober. I think if needing and wanting it is all that it took, we'd be holding 12-step meetings in Yankee Stadium. There would be 60,000 people beating down the door to get in there. Every recovery platform, treatment option would be completely filled to the brim, and that's just not the case. So I do believe now that there's more to it. It's
Sure.
I mean, it's a complicated process. There's a lot of stuff that sort of goes into it, and the unfortunate truth is that most people right now are not successfully recovering from this.
Yeah.
That's by whatever measurement, statistical measurement you want to throw out there, it doesn't look great.
No.
And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. Me, for example. Okay, so I said, by training, I'm a doctor of pharmacy. Okay, so I graduated when I was 26. Okay, so I said that I didn't draw a sober breath throughout my 20s. So that means that whole time it was all sort of interwoven in there as well. People, one of the first questions that people will ask me, like when they hear about like my history is did you go to pharmacy school because of the drugs, because of your drug addiction?
That was definitely going through my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's that is an understandable question. And I used to give all kinds of different answers. I used to, really think about it and try to give. And you know what? Like the answer that I give now, this is just as honest as it looks from my perspective. I was really good at math and science, and I loved Oxycontin. And when you combine those two things,
mix.
When a 21-year-old who is considering, going on for school and to, take some entrance, I just took that entrance exam, really not committing to it. I just sort of, I mean, like I said, I was really good at taking tests, and I was good at math and science, which this exam required, and I was in love with Oxycontin at the time. And I took this test and I got in, and all of a sudden I just packed my bags and I showed up there, and my life just started going in that direction. That's what I was talking about with the won or lost in the trenches of everyday life. I think that our lives, and if talk about our recoveries, whether or not we thrive or we struggle, it's never the big things. It's just a series of these tiny little decisions that sort of point us in a certain direction, and then over time, we're either more in line with wellness, or we're sort of more in line with the sickness. One of my favorite authors, just as a quick side, his name is David Hawkins. He did incredible work in the field of consciousness study. He passed away a few years ago. I think he was in his 90s. Just some awesome books. One of them was called Power versus Force, and in there he talks about what he calls the law of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. And the whole point there is, if you're sailing across the Atlantic Ocean and you're commandeering a ship and your compass is miscalibrated, let's say by 1 degree, and you keep sailing like that, for an hour, well, you're going to be off course, but just slightly, you might be just a mile off course. If you keep doing that for 2 weeks straight, with just that 1 degree miscalibrated compass, you're going to find yourself hundreds of miles off course. And I think that's the way that it is for us a lot of times, that we do these tiny little things and then continue down that path, that each one in itself might not be hugely impactful. But when you add them up and extrapolate that, all of a sudden, man, it's a big deal. That's why,
Sure.
I mean, I'm so big into routine.
Yeah.
That is that reason, when somebody says, oh, I mean, there are people that can scoff at certain things, like addiction is so complicated. What does eating have to do with it? Right. Or what does, what time you go to sleep have to do with it?
Sure.
Or all these little things. And it's like, you're right. Each day, it is not a significant difference. So each day, like tomorrow, if I get 3 hours of sleep because I stayed up, because I was drinking coffee all night and I stayed up and I was playing video games and whatever, I sleep from 4 to 7. The chances of me relapsing tomorrow are actually pretty low. They are. Yeah, I'm pretty stabilized right now. That if you were a betting man, the risk of me relapsing tomorrow is low.
Yeah,
however, if I
based
continue
on the
that,
yeah,
exactly. Now, if I just continued that and all other things started falling apart, that's when it kind of sets up this whole domino effect, and and it becomes a problem. So,
Yeah.
for me, so yeah, so I went to pharmacy school. I was, I was doing a little bit, but it wasn't nearly as bad as when I graduated. I went to school in New Jersey. I flew out to Southern California. My wife and I, she was my fiance at the time. Okay. I've actually been married for 10 years. If there's one part of my story that is maybe like a little different than some other people, is that I did probably the only thing surprising. Everything else is just a typical drug addict story, really. But I kept a marriage together throughout
Wow.
that span, which, like I say, probably says more about her than it does about me. But I mean, I'm incredibly thankful for her.
Yeah.
She had every right. At a lot of times during that, I mean, she would have been well in her right to have gone a different direction, and I or nobody else could have held that against her. But we're still doing it, and
That's awesome. Well, so where
yeah.
did things have to get for you? I know you were saying, like, when you were in school or in your later 20s, it wasn't the drug use wasn't as bad, so to speak, as it was earlier on. But where did this have to go for you to finally be like, okay, because you said yourself, like, needing it and wanting it isn't enough. And I'm with you. I think for me, for a long time, like, I wanted it. I did what some people would describe as, I did my research. Like, I started looking
Right.
into, like, so how could I actually get sober? Where would I go? What would I do? Treatment centers, stuff like that. What did it take for you to actually get into action and start really doing something about this? And what did that look like?
Yeah. So what it looked like was being court ordered to a 90-day treatment center. Yeah,
Okay.
that's I mean, that's what started the whole thing.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, I always wanted to be so. I wanted to be sober for
Hmm.
years, but I never
Hmm.
wanted to stop doing drugs,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I sort of wanted both. So I ended up going out there. I was working as a retail pharmacist, okay, which means that it's like your corner pharmacy. When you go in there, that guy who's back there, that was
Yeah.
me. So
Right.
you can imagine that is probably not the best place for a raging opiate addict at the time.
Hmm.
And those opiate addictions can just go through the roof. If you have unlimited access like that, and nothing kind of intervenes. I mean, I was taking well over 1,000 milligrams of oxycodone every day,
Wow.
well
Yeah.
over 1,000. So I mean, if you've taken a 5 milligram Percocet for your teeth surgery, that was the opiate equivalent of over 200 of them. And the reason that I use that number sometimes, actually, I didn't used to do that. It's not to compare my addiction quantitatively with somebody else to suggest that I'm better or worse, or my story was better or worse.
Right.
The reason is that since that time, I've heard from so many people, especially people with opiate addictions, who believe that they've done so much permanent damage
Mm.
over the years.
Hmm.
Uh, and once they get sober, and they're sober for a few weeks or a couple months, and they just still feel so horrible and depressed and lethargic, and doesn't feel like their mental acuity is there. They think that that's it,
Yeah.
that they need something. And the reason that I say that is because I felt like that also,
Hmm.
and I don't feel like that now. So I do believe that there are things we could do. That's sort of part of where I'm coming from with supplementation. I think a lot of that stuff, especially in the beginning, can be absolutely invaluable. That's why I sort of throw that number out there. Yeah. Eventually I kind of admitted to my employer, a little bit of what I was doing. They were obligated to bring that in front of like the administrative courts. The court said, basically things were going to be going very bad for me.
Okay.
Uh, Unless I completed this 90-day treatment stint.
Yeah.
I did that. I wasn't happy about it. It was horrible. But after a few months, and they kind of got you into the like 12-step program. Okay, so I got like right from that treatment center, I got plugged in with some 12-step groups in Southern California. Okay, and 12-step recovery it's huge around there. It is vibrant. There is energy and passion around around those groups, and you can really find a group for anything. It's so I got into it, and I read all the books, and I read the literature, and I was really into it, and I was doing that stuff for a while. And this is no reflection upon them. This is just what happened to me. So I ended up getting back into a pharmacy pretty quickly out there. At about 5 months. Yeah. So I had 5 months sober, the 3 months in the treatment center and then 2 months out. And I went back into the pharmacy, thinking I was doing well,
Right.
thinking my mind was right. And the first day back, I was doing the exact same stuff.
Wow.
And, so fast forwarding shortly after that, I was faking drug tests for a little while, but eventually that'll catch up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost my license to practice out in California. This was 7.5 years ago. And then for the next year, I was just basically a street junkie. It was just heroin and methamphetamine for a year. And it was, got as dark and as horrible as I ever would have expected that my life could have gotten at that point. And man, I was completely baffled, I had somebody like me, right? Somebody whose life experience up until that point, those first 20 something years looked like mine, should not be smoking heroin off of tinfoil in his car under the garage trying to live. Something unbelievably horrible happened that I couldn't wrap my head around. And that's, so that was my bottom. And then, shortly after that, we ended up moving back. I was kind of on and off trying to get sober a little bit. Like my wife got pregnant during that time. And then my son was born. And I didn't get sober until my son was about 9 months old. And I tell people, I'll tell a lot of, especially, I know that you're a young father, you have your little girl's a couple weeks old. Congratulations. That's incredible.
Yeah, thanks.
And something happens when you're actively addicted. Something happens once you bring a baby into the mix, and things can get really dark really fast, and it really is like a turning point. You can either pursue recovery at that point, or what happens in probably more cases than not is that your life can get exponentially more horrible than you thought it was ever possible of getting.
I can imagine.
And one of those reasons is that anybody who's left in your life, any human beings who are still sort of on your side, and they're looking, look, this is a disease. You're not a bad person. You're just a sick person. Let's get you some help. All that stuff. All of a sudden, you just feel even those people pulling away. And because there's an infant here, there's an infant that needs to be protected from me. And that's the reality of the situation. It is one thing for, to be trying to help this guy who is really bottoming out. It's another thing. You can't knowingly leave a methamphetamine addict in a house with an infant.
Yeah.
You can't do that. So all of a sudden it just, like that baby is gone, and people are coming, and, my parents, maybe different people are taking him, watching him over here. And it's like, I was really uninvolved. I'm thankful that there were people who intervene like that, because I know that that's not always the case. There are heroin addicts, active heroin addicts, who raise infants, and the results are not always great. But shortly after that, I was brought to, so I'm in the Philadelphia area now, and there's a guy at 20 something years sober. He was a friend of one of my cousins who actually contacted him, and he brought me to a meeting out here. And something was just different this time. I got plugged in with a group of guys. I started taking their direction, and I started doing some things, and everything slowed down this time. That's one of the big differences, was that everything just completely slowed down. And it took me a long time to start feeling better, but one day at a time. It's been quite a ride.
That's awesome. And so tell me what, I think you already did. Tell me what the primary purpose of reaction recovery really is. I mean, what are you trying to accomplish? Is it just essentially, I know you talked about, if someone's on, medication. Obviously, you try to implement some type of supplementation regime, right, to kind of help with that, or help in early sobriety, especially, right? What is really the end game with what you do with reaction recovery? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with someone that you're working with?
Yeah. So the what I'm trying to accomplish ultimately,
Hmm.
the end target is stress regulation.
Okay,
That's what it is.
that makes
We
sense.
know. I mean, look, people can argue and debate about what caused addictions,
Yeah, yeah,
what perpetuates addictions, what cures addictions, right? Everybody's going to have kind of like their own perspective. One thing that we can agree on, I mean, this has been confirmed. This is not, um, uh, you know, debatable, I guess,
mm,
is that the number one risk factor, most highly correlated to relapse, is going to be stress, psychological and physiological stress. Whatever that looks like, so that stress might look different to different people. It might
sure.
be getting promoted, might cause that stress. Maybe getting fired causes that stress. Maybe having a baby causes that stress. Maybe losing your kids causes that stress. Whatever it
Mm,
is. So nothing that I don't uh, kind of refer to anything as like good or bad life events, but it is that people recovering from drug addictions have difficulty regulating stress. We know that. That's one of the three primary neural circuits that get disrupted. All of us. So the three primary neural circuits that in every single addiction are going to be distorted, and then the only question is, it's just a matter of degree. It's going to be the incentive reward, um, the incentive reward, the incentive motivation, the attachment reward, and then stress control. Those three. Uh, and the name of the game is going to be somehow getting all three of those in check. And that is what anybody that you're looking at and talking to who is thriving in recovery,
hmm.
they might not know that this is what they're doing, but
Yeah,
somehow in their life they have set up a network of people, or they've set up like a little treatment strategy that addresses all three of those things. And
okay,
now all three of those things are actually mediated by three primary neurotransmitters. So incentive motivation is mediated through dopamine. The attachment reward is going to be mediated mostly through the endorphins,
okay.
secondarily serotonin, and then stress control is going to be your stress hormones.
Okay.
Okay,
And
so there's
so then,
cortisol.
so with the supplements, you are trying to regulate some of those specifically, I'm assuming.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It's working as like a jump start for a lot of people, um,
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
because if so let's just take the opiates. That's what I was talking about before, and that was my example.
Yeah.
Um, if you just stop, okay, so you go through a detox,
Hmm.
they safely get you off them. A couple weeks later, what's going on with your endorphin system and the dopamine pathways as well is, depending upon what you were taking, how much, and for how long, you're going to have almost no activity going on. There's going to be like no firing, especially if you were engaged in this for a very, very long period of time.
Sure. Yeah.
and and that period of apathy really is so uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and most people just can't see it through.
Yeah.
Say that last, again, like the intensity is going to vary depending upon what you were doing.
Right.
Say that lasts for 6 months or for 9 months or for a year,
Hmm.
until you really start to, I mean, dude, I didn't smile for months. Really, I
Yeah.
didn't smile or laugh for months. Most people aren't able to make it through that period. It's just too
Hmm.
much.
Hmm.
I mean, you can go to meetings and hear people. You can start doing some things and jump into the work, and look, I'm not taking anything away from that stuff. You kind of mentioned my 12 daily rules. My first rule is connect with the fellowship. That has to be the cornerstone. The keystone of anybody's recovery is people.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. So, yeah. So, I want to hop into those here. And look, I appreciate just to rewind real quick, I appreciate what you're talking about, the stress on both sides of the equation, like good or bad, good and bad, right? Um, I think that for a lot of people, they don't consider that the stress can come up. Like for me, for instance, things got good really fast. and which can be a big problem sometimes for people in
Yeah.
recovery. I mean,
Oh yeah.
if you just think about, when you say stress to me early in recovery, I think for most people, it's going to be some type of financial stress. And so if I'm not spending all my money on dope or alcohol all the time, and all of a sudden I have more money in my pocket, or I get a new job or something because I'm actually kind of holding my life together, and I start having all this money come in, that can be, a stressful thing. So I appreciate you mentioning
Absolutely.
that. And I also, I think what you're saying, which I can fully understand for myself, since I was an opiate addict, is that even if someone early in recovery is doing the things that they need to be doing, and I think we're going to be talking about some of those, which are just kind of generally accepted, that are built into your 12 rules for recovery. Even if they're doing those things, they're going to be uh, physiological things that are still going on well after the drugs or alcohol are gone, that if we don't do anything about it, it's not necessarily 100% that someone will relapse. It's just making things more difficult, right?
That's right.
And so that makes a lot of sense to me, for sure. So let's hop in. And I didn't want to cut you off there, but you were getting into the 12 rules for recovery. So I'm going to rattle these off real quick because we got 12.
Go ahead,
And then I want to
please.
ask you about one in particular. Okay. So we got,
Please.
number one, connect with the local fellowship, which you just touched on. We got wake up at the same time every morning, set aside 15 minutes of morning quiet time, eat breakfast, establish a supplement regimen, exercise every day, be engaged in a good book, be selective what information you consume, stop making things worse before you make them better. I like that one. Clean your room, floss every night, keep going no matter what. Now, I think we could agree that these are great rules for probably anyone, whether they're in recovery or not. I think even number one, like connect with a local fellowship, probably good for people just to connect with others and kind of have a group that they connect with. The one that I really want to, and I think overall, you mentioned routine earlier, and you and I have talked about routine before. I think what we're really talking about overall with these is like the importance of having some kind of routine. But I want to ask you about rule number 5 specifically, and you were getting into it a little bit. This is your area of expertise, and that's establishing a supplement regimen. Because I really want our listeners to understand, like, okay, we're talking about some cool concepts here about how this can help, people in recovery. What would you say are some of the main supplements that people in recovery should really consider taking?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I could answer that question very quickly.
Sure, yeah.
That one, I mean, I would have to, that one, it would take me a while, but I'm going to try to pick at it, and hopefully this is as helpful to anybody listening as possible.
Sure.
The one thing that I think sort of positions me a little bit different, maybe than some other people, is that my background is in pharmaceuticals, pharmacy, and nutrition. That is sort of after getting sober, I went back and got certified as a dietary supplement advisor. So I think that's like a little bit unique that I have, clinical experience in both of those areas, because I think it's really, really important. Doing your own. So thing about supplements versus prescription pharmaceuticals, right, is that they're not by prescription. So they are available over the counter, which means that you can log on to Amazon, and anything that you hear anybody talking about at any time, you can buy it, right? I think just for the public consumer to be sort of establishing their own supplement regimen and doing that in a healthy and helpful way is hard.
Yeah.
I just think it's really hard.
Sure.
And I also know a lot about how the search engine optimization works for supplements versus pharmaceuticals, and how like a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, unfortunately, they have so much money and they're so powerful that they're able to really suppress a lot of good information.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that anybody who's on Google, we just know this. There's been all kinds of studies. People don't just scan page after page after page. It's usually those first couple things that are popping up that are having the most impact. So what is coming up is being controlled, by
Sure.
somebody who's not really, who doesn't have a financial incentive for supplements to look good, right?
Yeah, right.
Of
Well, and
course.
I think real quick, Jeff, I should probably just throw out a disclaimer. Like this is not a go, because look, I'm in fitness and nutrition. There's just a lot of BS about supplements out there.
So
Quick
much.
disclaimer. This is not a go take these supplements. This is 100% right for you. I think what I'm asking is what are some suggestions that like people should consider looking at, maybe if they're
Okay.
early in recovery or if they're a little lethargic or, so I think that needs to be said, right?
Okay. That aside, right. So I'm very, very big into the amino acids. All right. Now I think that there are some staples right off the bat. If you are recovering from an alcohol addiction,
Mm-hmm.
I think that everybody should be taking B vitamins, a vitamin C separately, a multivitamin
Okay.
supplement, and a magnesium calcium supplement right off the bat. Yeah, I really don't need to see blood work. As long as there are no major contraindications, that would contraindicate you from taking one of those specific products, get that stuff on board. Very, very helpful. It helps. And omega-3 fatty fish.
Sure.
That is important for so many people can really, really benefit from omega-3, especially drug and alcohol addictions.
Mm.
People tend to, they're not consuming that. We know that. Again, the study is sort of conclusive there. We know that as a group of people, you're not consuming enough regular fatty fish to kind of, because when we're looking at like the omega fish oils, we're comparing omega-3 to omega-6, really omega-3 to omega-6 and 9, and it's the ratio that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
especially in our, you can call it the SAD diet, right? The standard American diet,
Right.
of just hot dogs and hamburgers and fries and whatever else you're doing. You are loading up with omega-6 and omega-9, and they're so inflammatory. And when you're trying to recover your entire physiology and your mind and your sharpness, and you don't want to feel tired and fatigued and sort of mentally clouded.
Mm-hmm.
That's where all those products come in. You want to get like the inflammation stuff on board. Omega-3s right off the bat. Okay, so to answer your question, just sort of right across, right off the bat, without looking at blood tests, I would name a couple of those things. Now I'm really big into the amino acids.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you and I talked about them before.
I think we did a little bit. Yeah. I think
did we get
you
into
mentioned
them?
like L-tyrosine was one of them, and a few others. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was mentioning before the three major nervous system networks that are dysregulated in people that are recovering.
Right. Yeah.
And then those neurotransmitters that are going to be off are GABA, serotonin, endorphins, and your catecholamines, okay, which are dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So taking those precursors to those neurotransmitters, they can at least work, like I said before, as a jump start to at least fill in the blanks for areas that you will certainly be deficient in coming in. The only question is, to what degree are you deficient? You mentioned L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine is the immediate precursor to L-dopa, okay, which gets converted to dopamine, also epinephrine and norepinephrine. If you're talking about amphetamine addictions, alcohol addictions, benzodiazepine addictions, opiate addictions, there will be disruptions in those catecholamines, all right, specifically dopamine. Okay. And that stuff can take a while to really get going. And one of the biggest complaints that people have in early recovery is lack of motivation, lack of energy, just trouble getting going. Everything just feels harder, right? It's just hard to empty the dishwasher, to fold the laundry, everything. It just kind of feels like a struggle. And I can relate to that. And if there's one product, in my experience, now I've read all the trials, so I know that this stuff has good science behind it, and That's why I'm talking about it. But right now, from my clinical experience of working with people, man, that one seems to have such a great effect for just about everybody.
Hmm.
Now, if you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, uncontrolled hypertension, then I would say stay away from most of the amino acids, because you really don't want anything that is going down the path of potentially dealing with epinephrine or kind of some of those catecholamine products. So if it's unregulated, if you have regulated high blood pressure and it's being controlled with medications or with lifestyle changes, then this stuff is safe.
Okay.
But for the most part, so that small group aside, tyrosine is a very safe product, and I usually it's going to vary depending on the person involved, but I usually recommend 500 milligrams 3 times a day, for example, maybe 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 p.m. I usually say, for tyrosine, like nothing after 2 to 3 p.m.
Okay.
It could potentially disrupt sleep.
Okay.
Everybody doesn't have that. It's just like caffeine. Some people can drink caffeine at
Sure.
6 o'clock and sleep fine. Some people, if you have coffee after 12, you're not
But
getting
it's
to
not
sleep
a
for a while.
direct
So
stimulant, right? Like,
it's not a stimulant. No,
okay.
none of these, so like the idea with supplements in general, especially with addictions, is that we get very obsessive and addicted to that immediate hit.
Yeah.
So you don't want to take anything. A good rule of thumb is you don't want to take anything where 30 minutes later you feel
Yeah. Off the wall.
alive,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Alive or even completely sedated. I mean,
Sure.
there's how many people get completely thrown off from these sleeping
Yeah.
pills,
Sleeping pills. Yeah.
and that's that one continues to come up, and it's because everybody has sleeping problems when you're first getting sober.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, well, I'm just going to rough my way through it. After a couple of weeks, you feel like I need to do something about this. And then people, might go to these Ambiens and Sonatas
Yeah.
and those products are actually activating GABA, the exact same receptor that alcohol is sort of touching on. So if you're trying to recover the physiologically, okay, you're trying to recover from this alcohol addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, putting a sedative hypnotic on board is probably not your best option. I will say, in terms of sleep, the combination of magnesium and glycine, okay, magnesium and glycine, that is a great combo.
Interesting.
That one I've been talking about for a while. That's sort of like the tyrosine, where I can't think of a specific instance where somebody had any kind of suboptimal impact from it at all. I mean, these are products that really work very well together. They work to smooth out the sleep cycle. Okay, so they're not putting you to sleep.
Right.
You're not going to take them. For example, I could take magnesium and glycine right now and just carry out the rest of my day. It's not going to make me more sleepy. But when you take it at night, it tends to smooth out that whole sleep cycle, and it can really get people sleeping regularly a lot faster than they otherwise would have. And that's my point with the supplementation. Okay, is that when we're dealing with an area that is just wrought with these horrible relapse rates, right? We don't have the luxury to be missing anything. So, so once in a while, like, you will hear somebody who talks about nutritional changes as sort of like a cure-all, and like it's the this is the root cause of addictions. I steer clear of those people. Okay, this is not that. Addiction is unbelievably complicated. I think if you're really serious about recovery, then you need to know about trauma. You need to learn about trauma, how trauma is associated with addictions. I think that adverse childhood experiences, that there's unbelievable studies done out of Kaiser Permanente several years ago. If you've never heard of them, look them up. Great stuff, just showing how these ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, impact the relative risk of you developing an addiction later on. So anybody who's just telling you this is a strictly genetic disorder, I mean, that is not the case. And I used to say that like a little bit more tempered than I do now. Now I just say it just the way that I just did. I mean, this is important stuff, because that is how we're going to get this cultural epidemic under control. So that's the whole idea with supplementation, is that anything that's moving us, that is going to help us get through that initial phase, it's going to increase the likelihood that we start stabilizing quickly. I think we have a better chance of getting people, to that 6-month mark, 9-month mark, year mark. And then maybe by that point they have formed a network around them. Maybe they're in a 12-step group. Maybe they have some other strong local fellowship of people, and that they can just kind of keep treating this underlying disease one day at a time. But kind of one place that I differ from the 12-step groups is just this idea that whether you have 3 days sober or 10 years sober, it's all the same disease. It's just this underlying dis-ease that we need to treat. I agree that there is that, but to act like that physiological component is not there is just to miss a big piece.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So you just gave two really good, I think you nailed it pretty well on what I really wanted you to share. So on the motivation side of things, in terms of the supplements, and again, a supplement is exactly that, right? It is to supplement. Like, there are other things we should be doing, and you talked about it. You talk about it in your 12 rules for recovery. Exercising, getting up at the same time. Some type of routine, eating healthier, eating breakfast is one thing you suggest. So this is not the cure-all isn't in the supplements themselves. It's that over time, these can be things that really help, right? So on the motivation side of things, you feel like the L-tyrosine is something that's really helpful. And that's something that I actually take every morning as well. And then on the sleep side of things, it's the glycine and the glycine and what was the other one?
Magnesium glycinate. Magnesium glycinate, because magnesium, comes in about 6 or 7 different forms. Okay. And they do all different things. Some of them are treat constipation, so they're going to be more working as laxatives. You want to avoid those products. Okay. It is magnesium glycinate is the one that you want.
Yeah, you don't want to be getting hate mail after this, man, with people loading up on laxatives trying to go to sleep.
What's up with this guy? No, well, that's why I try to throw in some of these caveats. It's tough because our time is limited, and I find myself when I'm talking about supplements, I start really talking fast, trying to get it all in.
Cram it in,
because I feel like there's so much that I want to jam pack into a short period of time. I do want to just kind of mention, in terms of nutrition, very, very quickly, just my 3 basics. I think one area that I've been seeing people really, really struggling with is a lot of people that are getting sober either have histories of disordered eating, or once they get sober and they stay sober, their addiction sort of transfers to some of these either food addictions or even body addictions, right? Where we become obsessed with our bodies and our physiques. And
absolutely,
it just makes sense. I mean, if you think about the neurochemistry of addiction, you stop your one drug of choice or behavior of choice, it doesn't just disappear. It gets it moves. So I'm very big into nutrition for recovery is about gaining. Okay, it is not about losing. Over time, if you establish a good, healthy kind of parameter of nutrition, a lot of those things will happen. Maybe weight loss will happen. Your body might start changing, but that is not the goal. It is about adding on things. So I have 3 sort of kind of major outcomes that I focus on right off the bat. Number 1 is to limit and refine the processed sugars. That's number 1. I'm not saying cut them out. I'm not saying quit them completely. Some of these concentrated processed sugars, they're unbelievably addictive. They're very hard to give up. And that is not about long-term health. That is about mood regulation right now. We know for a fact that people that are recovering from drug and alcohol addictions have dysregulated blood sugar metabolism across the board. And they've shown that it's been like 85 to 90% of people who come in have difficulty processing these large amounts of sugar. And some of that was may have kind of predated the addiction. Some of it was exacerbated by alcohol, for example, because alcohol sugars make that worse. But we know that we have trouble with that. we are predisposed to hypoglycemia, okay, which means that the blood sugar is dropping after eating all those sugars. And that leads to irritability and fatigue and anxiety and just all those symptoms that we know are going to be related to alcohol cravings, even relapse if they don't get, kind of controlled. So that's number one.
Okay.
I always say high protein, high fiber food with every meal and snack. That should be your focus. All right. So I'm not telling anybody what to do with your carbs, sugar, protein combination. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying focus on the proteins and the fiber.
Yeah.
Because what that does is it will keep you feeling full longer, so that a couple hours later, you're not craving those sugars and then fall into that trap that we all get into where it's 3 o'clock and you're binging on sweets, and then that kind of creates this whole cycle throughout your day, and now it disrupts your sleep. I wear one of these watches now, and I'll do experiments all the time, where once in a while, for whatever reason, I will eat that stuff late at night. And every time my overnight resting heart rate is about 5 or 6 beats per minute higher than it typically is.
Interesting.
And that's because the heart rate just stays up for longer, and then it kind of slowly comes down over time. So that is where where it's a popular thing to say that like when we eat doesn't matter. It's just what we eat. It's like it all doesn't. Well, that is where when we eat actually does matter. It matters because if you're keeping your heart rate and all those stress hormones up overnight for longer periods of time, then your body is not slipping into that really deep restful sleep. And if that continues over long periods of time, then those disrupted sleep patterns will affect your mood. And of course, we know that your mood eventually will affect your ability to stay sober.
Yeah, you're
so all that stuff is connected.
Okay.
It matters.
So
if you're talking about weight.
Yeah. And sorry, so number one was watch the highly processed sugar or processed sugar. Number two was focus on protein and fiber. And then
with every meal and snack.
Yeah, with every meal. Okay, every meal and snack. Okay.
And then 3 is going to be eat something every several hours to avoid the blood sugar drop.
Okay.
That has been from what I've seen, especially in early recovery. Again, if you've been stabilized and then you want to do, the different types of fasting, things that are out now, or different, you do what you have to do. I'm talking about in those opening months, that first year especially. I have not seen any cases in my experience where that tends to do well.
Yeah.
It seems that it all has to be about stability, and it has to be about mood control. And that is the focus of your nutrition.
Man, I really like those 3 points. Yeah. And it's funny, we started out, you mentioned just some of the sayings in recovery and the eating every few hours. As much as I laughed at the hungry, angry, lonely, tired, man, I think that's something that applies to like just about anyone, whether they're in recovery or not. But I certainly saw that early on. Like if I didn't eat, like I was getting a little hangry for sure, and didn't feel that great. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing, man, because I think I'm hoping that it's something that people are looking at more and more. I do see more treatment facilities focusing in on nutrition and things like that, which is, so important. And I'm with you. I think that sometimes within recovery programs, 12-step or otherwise, it's a missing piece that I think is maybe a little bit ignored sometimes. And I think it's important because in my mind, it's as simple as this. If I have zero energy, I'm completely unmotivated to do everyday things. I just don't feel good overall. How is that going to have a positive impact on my recovery? How is that going to, impact the likelihood that I stay sober? It's probably not going to have a positive effect. So I really appreciate everything you've shared on the supplements, about reaction recovery, definitely about the nutrition, because I think that's so important. Before we wrap up, Jeff, I'd like to ask if there's maybe one piece of advice in particular that you'd like to share with the Sober Nation?
Yeah, I would say that the most important thing, if you're considering a life free from the bondage of drugs and alcohol, if you consider yourself somebody who's looking into the recovery world, you have to connect with other people. You have to connect with good people. One of the rules that you touched on was about carefully selecting the information that you consume. What I mean by that is, who are the people that you're around? Who are the voices that are constantly populating your mind? I mean, this is the stuff. These are the people that will have the most impact on you moving forward. Connect yourself with a group. There are more and more online and kind of virtual things that are available now versus before. I still do it in person. I think that there's nothing that can substitute for that sort of face-to-face being there with people. But you have to connect with a group of people. You're dealing with something that is just working kind of below those conscious controls of your brain. So it's reading books is great, talking about it is great, thinking about it, but ultimately, it's a game of action, and it is actually taking those actions that will ultimately keep you sober.
That's awesome, man. I love that. Watch you hang around, stick with the winners, and get into action. I couldn't put any better than that. So you can learn more about Jeff and Reaction Recovery at reactionrecovery.com. Thanks again for coming on the show, Jeff.
Thanks a lot, John. Great time.
Be sure to check out the show notes for all the info from today's episode. Sober Nation FM is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Sobriety Engine is a free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. This show is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle while supporting your sobriety, you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And again, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Nation, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.